details of that. A couple of quick safety notes. A few minutes, I'll let you walk around a little bit as we go down these sites and take a look at what's going on out here. Just be careful not to go too close to the edge. There's a little bit of a steep slope, but it's slippery. There actually is a pipe grab here that if you're walking close, you might trip over. So just basically stay on the gravel. You probably don't want to go in the mud anyway. This is the Geddes Brook site. Geddes Brook is this stream right here. Originally, this stream just essentially ran from where it comes out of Dolphins over there, straight down. 9 Mile Creek is down there. 9 Mile Creek runs into Onondaga Lake. Upstream of this site was a site called the LCP Linden Chemical Plant. They produced chlorine using mercury. Mercury is a heavy metal which is can cause contamination. Back in the day, 100 years or so ago, there were no environmental regulations. No one really knew how dangerous mercury was. So whenever they had a spill or just part of the process, they just put it down the drain, just got released into the environment. That got into what's called the West Flume, essentially a drainage ditch that ran near the site. And since water flows downhill, that flowed downhill over till where it enters into Geddes Brook, which is on the other side of the bridge over there, the 695 bridge. LCP is over by where the smokestack over on the other side of the bus over there. Mercury contaminated the West Flume, got into Geddes Brook, flowed down here, contaminated Geddes Brook and the associated floodplain, the entire area out here. That then flowed down to 9 Mile Creek, contaminated that, which then flowed to Onondaga Lake, and contaminated parts of Onondaga Lake. Now we're cleaning up Onondaga Lake, so of course the first thing we want to do is, before we clean up and remove the contamination in the lake, we need to get rid of the upstream sources. We don't want to remove it all, cap it, and then have it be recontaminated with upstream sources. So in 2003, we removed the LCP chemical plant, restored the area, took out all the mercury from the ground, created several wetlands up there. And then last year we completed the Geddes Brook site. We completely removed all of the soil in this area, down to the clay layer, replaced it, and then designed this wetland area. And we also, starting last year, started with 9 Mile Creek down there and are working our way downstream. We're right now about where 695 or 690 crosses it. And that'll be completed next spring so that we can dredge that area in the following fall. Now, prior to this being restored, this is what it looked like. We're standing here. Look over here. This berm here is that berm going out. The power lines over there are over on this side. And this was all essentially basically one depth, composed of one species called Phragmites. Does anybody know what Phragmites plant is? What is it? You know?
We have it in science class. They're up on the wall. They're not native species.
They're not native species. They're actually an invasive species. What they're called invasive is because they come in and they essentially crowd out all the other species that are in the area and create what's called a monoculture. So not very many bird species, wildlife species, insect species will use a habitat like this, and the entire area was like that. So when we came in, we removed all the sediment. We not only just restored it the way it was, we made it a lot better. We made the stream channel, instead of just being a straight channelized stream, we put these curves in it. It's called a sinuous channel. Essentially made the stream about twice as long as it actually was, because instead of going straight, it now winds. All types of habitat in the stream for the fish that live in there. And then we created wetlands, both that are connected to the stream and ones that are next to the stream. And on the other side, we created even more wetlands. So we went from something that looked like that to something that looks like this year. Okay, here's where we are. The stream, instead of just going straight down here, now has these curves to it. We have these channel grade wetlands, we call them, that are connected through channels. They go up and down the water level with the stream. We have these perched wetlands in between, right there basically, and right in here, that aren't fed by the stream except in the highest water levels. Those dry out in the summer, provide a sort of a unique wetland habitat. And then this area is actually completely isolated from this side because of that berm. So this side doesn't get any stream flow from the Geddes Brook. It just gets rain, snowmelt, groundwater influences. And these are restored as several shallow wetlands and a deeper wetland. Only during times when 9 Mile Creek gets really high will it flood over and flood this area. So we created a significant improvement in the amount of habitat and the diversity of habitats. Now, we planted about 30,000 individual trees, shrubs, and plants by hand in the Geddes Brook area. An additional 20,000 will go in 9 Mile, plus several hundred pounds of wetland and upland seed mix was put in here. That was composed of about 120 different species in that planting and seed mix in this area, and they're installed this entire area. You can see the orange flagging on the berm there. Those are actually each marking an individual tree or shrub that we planted, and that's the density of the trees and shrubs throughout the entire site. They put on about 4 to 8 foot spacing across this entire area. When we're done, we'll have about 13 to 15 acres of newly created wetlands in this area. Now, already in just the first year, last year essentially looked like that Phragmites swamp. It's gone from that to this. We've already documented 56 species of wildlife, fish species that are utilized in the area. Things like ducks, geese, herons. We've got a lot of fish that are reproducing and living in these wetlands. In fact, over in that pond over there, just a few weeks ago, we actually dragged a seine net through the corner of it, and we picked up 600 fish in that pond alone over there. Bass, things that got in when it was diverted over into the creek. The creek itself supports a trout fishery. Over on the other side, we sampled over by the bridge over there, and from here to the end of the school bus in a small stream about 5-6 foot wide, we got 300 to 400 brown trout in that one small section, mostly young of the year, small ones. Anybody have any questions so far? Comments?
Have you seen any eagles yet?
Yes, we have seen eagles. We have a lot of eagles actually that overwinter on the lake, and they fly around this area. We actually had an eagle perched on one of these large woody structures. You see these look like they're dead trees sticking out? Those weren't here. We actually installed those. We grabbed them from off-site and actually designed to put those in to provide roosting habitat, perching habitat for birds. The ones that come out of the stream that are closer to the wetlands, actually the turtles and frogs and stuff, and snakes come up and bask in the sun on those. And they're spread throughout the site, offering an additional habitat component that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years will be taken over by the trees and shrubs which will grow. But in the meantime, we put these there to offer immediate habitat. Any other questions at this point? Yep. It took about, not counting the wintertime months when it closed down, the restoration was started in fall 2011 and was completed in the summer of 2012. So probably about 8-9 months of actual construction of this. Then the planting took an additional 2 months. It was done most of it was done by last fall, the things we did over the winter. So a couple months to plant all the stuff, and so a total of about a year to complete everything. Yep.
How many species would you have had before rehabilitation?
Well, there were about maybe a dozen because of the invasive species. What you would expect in an area like the natural area would be about 100 to 150, 200, depending on the diversity of habitats that you have. Maybe a little bit less, because usually in an area like this, you tend to have either ponds or wetlands or uplands or channel with immediate areas next to it that are wetlands. Not sort of these streams. You have upland habitat on these berms. You have deep marshes over there, shallow marshes. So we sort of crammed all the different variety of habitats that you can have in New York State sort of into one small section. So we probably end up with a lot more species in the long run that utilize this area and plant species that will actually inhabit this zone than you would maybe normally suspect for an area that's this size. Any other questions, comments at this point? Why don't we walk around a little bit, maybe warm up a little bit this way? Show you two other things we got. You know what kind of plant we see growing in this first wetland there, the one we grow on over here?
Cattails?
Cattails, yeah. Actually, it's kind of interesting because that species actually wasn't planted here. Because the cattails, you see the cattail part, the brown part, that's all composed of millions of seeds and they're very fluffy. They actually flew in from associated areas or nearby areas and actually colonized this area naturally.
You might want some pictures.
Yeah. That's for you. Hey, Madison, you got the pictures? Yeah, she's got pictures.
Are we going out there?
I'm going in a couple minutes. Let me take over. Okay. Anybody know what this is? Yep, this is Phragmites. This is the invasive species that came in and basically took over this entire area. Now, why this species is so bad is, okay, this is a seed head on it. All these, there's literally hundreds of thousands of seeds. Each one of these is a seed, and they blow. Oops, sorry, in the wind. So these can come in from a long way away, especially when you have the entire area around it is surrounded by it. They come in on the water, float in. So you get one of these seeds that comes in and forms a plant. And you think, well, okay, it's going to take a while for that plant to form many seeds and spread. But what this does is it forms things called rhizomes. They're basically like roots. I had one. No. They're basically like roots that form underground and above the ground. And the above ground ones will actually, there it is. This is one we actually picked earlier. These will actually be over the top of the ground, and they'll actually grow in the summertime 4 inches a year. So you get one plant like this that'll start to put down roots underground and start to spread over ground. So you get one plant that'll start to grow out, and every few inches it'll sprout something like this. You see right there it's spread. And then that'll spread up, it'll produce seeds. The seeds will start to spread the plant, but then this one will start to spread more rhizomes across the ground, underground. The underground ones go about 5 to 10 foot a year, and then pretty soon you end up with, from one plant, you end up with an area like this, where you have a small area of plants. And that'll spread out and form more plants. And the seeds will grow and start to form more plants. So you start to get one and start to gradually spread almost like a spider web throughout the entire site. And what they do is they crowd out the other plants and eventually form a monoculture. So we want to keep this out at all costs. And what we've been doing is when we're seeing these types of things, we actually dig it up, we'll actually spray it with some herbicides in some cases that are safe to use in aquatic environments and actually decompose almost immediately. The stuff that's not taken up by the plants into water and hydrogen, so that no residual herbicide left in anything else.
But you said this area is surrounded by that?
Yep, there's some over in there, all on the other side of the stream, all that ground on the shoreline of 9 Mile Creek. You can see where the 9 Mile Creek restoration started, because the Phragmites is that brown stuff on the shoreline over there, and it stops right over there by the yellow hole. All that's Phragmites, so it's a continual process, continually coming in. And one of these rhizomes, right, this gets broken off, a little piece of this, and transported, say on a truck tire, and it gets put down on the ground, that'll survive and they'll start another plant. So the rhizomes that are broken up will form other plants, the seeds will form plants, so they'll get into these sites and they'll just gradually take over. And these types of sites are especially vulnerable because there's not a lot to compete with them. So our strategy is to plant a lot of trees and shrubs that over time, that'll help provide shade cover, and the Phragmites doesn't like that, like being in these more open areas. So between the competition with things like cattails, the other species over the long haul, we think it'll naturally be able to combat Phragmites. In the short haul, we have to pull it out when we see it, or spray it if it's a large enough site. So what types of animals do you think utilize an area like this? Fish?
Birds.
Yeah, we've had a lot of fish reproducing actually, sunfish, bass, things of that sort in the wetland habitat. And these types of connected wetlands have been largely eliminated, so it's a very critical component for nursery and reproductive habitat for birds. Turtles, did you say? Frogs and turtles. Yep, we've had a lot of frogs, tadpoles that reproduce, frogs that reproduce produce tadpoles over in those wetlands over there. Turtles in the stream and turtles in the wetlands, and they're utilizing a lot of the woody structure that we put in that's close to the stream. It just comes out of the water. They'll come up and they'll bask on that in the summertime.
By any chance, do you get beavers?
We did have, unfortunately, yes, we like all beavers, but we plant about 78, I think, large trees. There's some wildlife. 10 to 15 fall trees. You kind of see some of the leaves are off now. And actually one of the beavers went over on 9 Mile, got up there and saw it and actually cut it down. So we have to actually put fencing around the bottom of the trunks to make sure the beavers don't come and take in all the trees that we planted. Those tall ones are difficult and expensive to put in.
So they're good and bad?
They're good and bad. Yeah, they're good in the long haul. We want them in here. It's a critical species, a representative species for New York. I think it's the state mammal. But in the short term, we don't want it cutting down all our trees before they have a chance to establish.
Water snakes?
Water snakes, yep. All types of reptiles. And the wetlands are particularly critical habitats for amphibians that isn't that common anymore.
Do you think if you put in like just random twigs and sticks that maybe the beavers would take those instead of the long trunks?
They will take the ones that are just laying around the ground. But they like the larger ones. They actually have to chew. They actually have to chew on trees, or their teeth continually grow. They never stop. So the teeth that come out the front, they'll actually go back up and around, and if they stop eating, they'll actually end up killing the beaver. Go up, they'll penetrate and actually kill the beavers. They have to continually chew on something. So they're going to find the best plants to chew on that they can. And the nice small ones are nice, young, and tender for them, so they like to take those down. Any other questions at this point? Comments? You can walk around back towards the bus if you want. Take in the sights. Natalia's going. The government has DEC oversees the cleanup and remediation. So they're in charge of making sure that it's done right, making sure that the contamination was removed, that it doesn't come back. We've talked with them and worked with them cooperatively to come up with some success criteria for the restoration end of things. For example, in 5 years we have to have a minimum of 85% wetland cover out there, plant species. We have to have a certain survival of the trees and plants that are out there. We need to have fish and wildlife utilizing the area. We have to have a maximum amount of, I think, 5% of invasive species that are in the site. So, that essentially sets up after 5 years of that time period where it's really vulnerable. If we can meet those goals, we're hoping that after that, the site can take care of itself and we can let it go and be on its own. Yep, Natalia. I have to go to a meeting, so Natalia's going to take over and answer any more questions if you want. If you want to talk about the trees, plants, birds, animals, challenges we've had with like carp and deer and things like that. And you guys can walk up towards the bus if you want. One last question. I know. It's all over the place.
Are those native here?
They're not.
Burdocks?
Burdocks is not.
Oh.
They're not invasive though. They're just not native.
Look at the weird one. I mean, it's a spider.
All right.
Did you plan on planting the
got you.
or did
They came in that. They came in probably in the topsoil. We brought in the topsoil out of the offsite.
Right here.
Weeds, so we probably came in that. Weeds.
Take a picture of it. It's scary.
If you don't have any more questions,
Oh, it's a caterpillar.
Never take a picture.